All right, guys, welcome back. So today we're going to be talking about the stuff that went down in the Final Fantasy VII 25th anniversary stream. First off, the first thing that they showcased was a new season for the first Soldier mobile game, but I don't really play that. I have the game on my phone, but I've actually never opened it and played it. I'll have to try it out sometimes. Yeah, I'm not too interested in that. But next up, we got a new mobile game called Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis. And so essentially what Ever Crisis is it is a collection of everything that is original Final Fantasy from Final Fantasy VII, Crisis Core, Dirge of Cerberus, Advent Children, and there's also supposedly a new scenario that's been teased there at the end of the trailer with a young Sephiroth. Um, but it's a mobile game. It'll cover the original story, and on top of that, it'll have a similar battle system to the actual original Final Fantasy VII, where you'll be running around with like a chibi style character, and then when you enter battle, you'll have full scale models. And they are using the models of the remake versions. So far for the characters that are playable from what we saw from the trailer, we of course you got Cloud, Barrett, Tifa, Aerith, and Zack. But the thing about this mobile game is that it's episodic, so they'll be releasing story content episodically, and it's not all. You can't just download the mobile game and just play it all. It'll be episodic. On top of that, some cool things that I've seen inside the trailer were that they had some pretty unique costumes and weapons for the characters to use. But by far the coolest thing I think for me, because I already know the story of Final Fantasy, and the thing that intrigued me the most was the little end teaser with a young Sephiroth. That's completely new from what I know, from what I remember. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that is, and that might be something they end with after, like it might be the last thing in the episodic release. But yeah, the mobile game looks really good. Mobile games have come so far, so I have no doubt that it'll be a great way for people to experience the original story of Final Fantasy. And the next one is pretty exciting. It's such a huge announcement. I think people have been asking for it, but I don't think anyone was truly expecting it to happen. But we finally got Crisis Core re-release here, and it'll be on like pretty much every platform. It's called Final Fantasy Crisis Core Reunion. There they go, using the RE words again: reunion, remake, and now rebirth. But we'll get to rebirth last. Yeah, so it's essentially, according to Square Enix, it's an HD remaster. Like, you could have fooled me. Like, if you showed me this, I would have legit thought it was a remake from the ground up. But no, it's not a remake from the ground up. What they did was they went in and they updated, essentially just gave it a whole graphics overhaul. So new textures and new models. Even the voices, I believe, are new. They even went in as into they even went in and updated the model of the Buster Sword, because if you don't know, the Buster Sword originally, the hilt was gold. It was like a round gold piece, but in the remake they made it like a silver, like more squarish type of hilt, and so they updated it to match the remake version of the Buster Sword. And the game just looks great, but it's pretty much 100% from what I've seen. The same exact game, just new voices, new graphics, new models, which is great because Crisis Core is such a good story. The battle system's hella fun. The music's freaking dope as shit. And then on top of that, it has like one of the best endings I've seen in a video game. So I can't wait to replay that myself. I can't wait to play that for myself, and I can't wait for new people to experience that. Although it will sort of be weird, because although the Final Fantasy remake trilogy, yeah, because it's going to be a trilogy, and we'll talk about it again in a sec. But it's weird because Although this new Final Fantasy that we have in the modern times, the remake, we'll call it the remake trilogy, it's pretty much a sequel to the original story of Final Fantasy VII. So it's a bit weird. This is all hypothetical, what I'm about to say, and I think the story going forward, while it might, I could be completely wrong, I think it's going to follow the same major story beats as the original Final Fantasy, but how we get to those story beats will be different. Could be different, could be the same. So it's weird. Like, I don't know if I would recommend someone playing Crisis Core Reunion before FF7, because the way the trailer implied, and they even say it, is that you don't need any prior knowledge or anything to play Crisis Core because it is a prequel. Um, but at the same time, it if this was comparing it to the original Final Fantasy timeline, playing this game before Final Fantasy VII would ruin such a huge spoiler within the game, and that spoiler is even apparent in Remake. It's something that they've been still playing within the first game, and I think they're still going to play with it in the second game. So if you play Crisis Core Reunion prior to that, it will spoil you on that major reveal of that was in disc 2. But the way the Crisis Core Reunion trailer feels like, it feels like as if they want you to play it because it feels like something might be different in Remake Part 2 or Rebirth that will trump the reveal of the original timeline. So I'm not sure about that. That's just something we'll have to wait and see. I recommend you play Crisis Core, but at the same time, I don't know if it's a good idea if it's going to ruin that reveal within the second game. If they get that far in the second game, I don't know what they're going to cover. I think they might cover all of that. We'll have to see, though. Okay, so finally, next up, we have Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So yeah, they ended up changing the title from Remake to Rebirth. I liked the title change so much. I really wasn't a fan of them calling the first game a remake, although it's been revealed that there's a double meaning behind the subtitle remake, but I just wasn't a fan of it because it's sort of it's very misleading to people who aren't keeping up with any of this shit. If they're new to the series and they just see Final Fantasy VII Remake, most people are going to think this is a remake of the original story. And to be fair, I'd say a majority of the game is, but there are some heavy and major story things. They're sprinkled throughout the whole game, but the third act of the game just completely changes the whole playing field and just changes everything for the original story's timeline. And it's just the third act is just completely story changing. So I felt like the remake title was always misleading to new players, and I didn't like it. But they changed it to Rebirth, and again, these subtitles have double meanings. So there is a double meaning for Rebirth, and they did announce that this will be a trilogy, and the third subtitled game, or the third part, the name hasn't been revealed, and it probably won't be revealed until the second one's out and people have played it. And currently it was also announced, I actually have some notes here from the devs. So let's start off with the first one. So the first note here, it's a two-parter from Tetsuya Nomura, he's the creative director of Final Fantasy VII. So it says here, as revealed on the broadcast, there are currently 4 Final Fantasy VII projects being developed in parallel. Although each of their 4 titles plays a different role, they are all connected through the high-quality depictions of Final Fantasy VII's world and characters. As someone who was involved with the development of each and every one of the original titles, I deeply understand the vision and thoughts behind each project, and I am actively involved in the development process for all 4 titles. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is being designed so that people can enjoy enjoy this game whether they know the original game or not. In fact, new players might even enjoy starting their Final Fantasy VII journey with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Cloud and his friends embark on a new journey in this game, and I believe that the scenes that they witness after leaving Midgard will give players a fresh new experience. And that's the first part of the note. Let's see what he says in the second part. I can't wait to share the intentions behind the first title remake and the second title Rebirth. In time, I hope to reveal what the third title will be called and where this journey will ultimately lead. So yeah, this is referring to that the double meaning with the subtitles remake and Rebirth, and of course the third one's gonna have it. I was hoping that the third one was gonna be called Reunion, but they used the reunion subtitle for Crisis Course. The development of the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth has been progressing rapidly since we adopted a new development structure. A title of this scale in which everything is interconnected even before production began is truly rare. Truly rare. In fact, some development has already begun on the third title. I myself have started on development and am working towards the completion of the series. Wow, so it's good to see that. It's always good to see that everything was planned out accordingly before they started tackling all this. And it's crazy to see that we've barely scratched the surface in terms of things we've seen for Rebirth. And here we are getting news that he's already started development on the third title, which is insane to me. But it's good that they planned everything out. It's a good sign that, you know, it's all cohesive and they've got a plan. Then it says, we will work to deliver this title to fans with the same amount of enthusiasm from now until we reach the finish line. In the meantime, please enjoy the other 25th anniversary projects that further expand the world of Final Fantasy VII. Okay, so that's pretty much it. But the big thing, I think the big two things to take away from this Tetsuya Nomura note is 100% the double meaning stuff, as well as I think the number one thing for me here is that they already started development on the third title. So I wonder how far into development they are within Rebirth then, because unless they've both been being worked on side by side, which I'm not really a fan of. I don't like when games split their works into two different teams. I hope that them being developed at the same time doesn't cause issues. I doubt it, because they have a plan. So yeah. Next up, we got a message here from Naoki Hamaguchi. He's the director, and he says, I am overjoyed that we are able to announce Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and I feel a strong sense of duty to deliver the ultimate Final Fantasy VII experience to all fans eagerly awaiting this game. The development has already entered full production, and the team is highly motivated in putting everything together on a project and working to create a finished game. The Final Fantasy VII remake project will be a 3-part trilogy, but Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is much more than just one installment in the series. We are developing it with all the passion and dedication needed to create an original game and plan to deliver the ultimate gameplay and world building experience. So yeah, here again we get confirmation that it is a trilogy, and then we also get confirmation that this is 100% a original game. This is this Final Fantasy trilogy is a sequel to FF7. It will be its own original story. And then the last note is from Yoshinori Kitase, who's the producer, and he says, we have officially announced that the second title, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, will be released next winter, approximately 3 years after the original Final Fantasy VII Remake released in April 2020. 3 years may feel like a long time for all the fans who eagerly awaiting the next game, but we want to offer the best experience possible and reassure everyone that development is proceeding at an astonishingly fast pace for such a large-scale HD title. Making the middle part of the trilogy has its own challenges, but there are plenty of classic second installments in the world of film that are defined by stunning story twists and deeper explorations of characters. Often these second installments become a favorite amongst the fans. In the same vein, we are aiming to make Final Fantasy VII Rebirth an even more gripping and memorable experience. the Final Fantasy VII remake, then Final Fantasy VII remake. So please wait a little longer while we finish up. Okay, so um, he mentions here that there's different challenges with making the middle part, and I can understand that because the middle part of FF7 is open world. So that's going to be crazy in itself because I'm not sure how they're going to be tackling this, if they're just going to straight up make a massive world that you can just go around, or are they going to have zones? Are they going to do more of like an open zone type of thing? And it's crazy that it's being released next winter. We'll finally be able to play. Then again, that could mean like December or January. It's not specific on the year, but yeah, we'll have it soon. This winter we get Crisis Core Reunion, and next winter we get Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And next year is going to be packed for games, man. So many great games coming out next year, and even for Final Fantasy 16 comes out next year, I believe. So it's like we'll have Final Fantasy 16 as well as Final Fantasy 7. So if you're a Final Fantasy fan right now, you're just eating because you'll have Crisis Core Reunion. Then that'll fucking like carry you until 16, and then 16 will carry you until 7 Rebirth. So, and on top of that, there's going to be a huge amount of other games too coming out next year as well. So next year is going to be crazy for games. And again, it's really good to see with the last part here where they really seem like they're genuine in making this a very good and new experience in terms of story for all players. I feel like with Rebirth, there's like so much to cover in this part. I don't know how long and how are they going to handle pacing when this is supposed to be like a more open world experience. It's going to be interesting to see how all of that is tackled. It's going to be interesting to see what changes and what what they decide to keep. And there's a lot of memorable stuff that people want to see, and I believe they're trying to deliver on that based on these messages. Like for instance, like in the trailer for Rebirth, it seems like from the trailer we saw Cloud and Sephiroth, and it seemed like they were in the Nibelheim flashback. So I'm on the boat that when Rebirth starts off, the game's gonna start off with you on the back of that truck in that flashback, and we're gonna experience all of that flashback up until the point where, of course, Cloud cuts it off because he doesn't remember. But I think we're just gonna get straight into it with Rebirth. It's just gonna start off with a banger, and it's not gonna waste any time. Yeah, like if you watch this trailer, there's so much stuff that's said in it that's really symbolic, and there's so many messages there that you could just create theories upon theories, and it's clear. I feel like the trailer was purposely made with the intentions of answering those lingering questions that people had at the end of 7 Remake, because 7 Remake was controversial. In terms of the ending, it was a great game, but that ending was controversial because it pretty much confirmed that this is like if you put everything together once you replay that game and then you listen to what they're saying, the characters are saying at the end of the game, it's clear that this is going to be a sequel. But I feel like a lot of people were waiting for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's first trailer to be like put a nail in the coffin, like, okay, this is it, things are going to be different. And I think the first trailer did do that. That's it for the Final Fantasy VII 25th anniversary stream event. A lot of big news, a lot of stuff for Rebirth. Well, not a lot, but not enough, because I wanted so much more. Like that trailer just wasn't enough. Like I feel like we barely scratched the surface. And then we got Crisis Core Reunion. I can't wait to play that. And yeah, it's looking good for Final Fantasy fans for the next year. Next year is going to be packed full of content in terms of for Final Fantasy fans and just games in general. So yeah, I catch you guys in the next one.